loves, welcome to Conscious Chats with Jess
and Susie,
where we have mind-expanding chats about this wild ride of life.
We'll be talking about embodiment, self-mastery, health and wellness, spirituality, and everything else between. Thank you for being here, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Yay! Hello, welcome to Conscious Chats.
Welcome back. So happy that you're here with us again. And today, Susie and I have a topic, we've called it the evolution of emotions, with a focus on reflecting on shame and guilt. So those heavier emotions that we tend to hold a lot of as society. And then the ways that on the ladder of emotions, how we can start to sort of transform that into something that is useful and of a higher state or a higher octave. So yes, it can, when we first kind of discussed this, we acknowledge that it's a heavy topic, but also something that's necessary to speak about because it's filtered through society so much, and it's something that I have experienced a lot of growing up, and something that I've recently been reflecting on of why I've kind of chosen different paths or decided to do different things. Sometimes there was the reason behind it of feeling ashamed of something or guilty about something, so then choosing to do something to make me feel better about it or less, more like avoid that emotion and kind of almost cover it up or bypass it. So with all the emotional intelligence work that Susie offers and that I also practice with Susie and in various other containers, it's like rather than these heavy things that we kind of create this danger zone around, this red tape where it's like, do not go there, avoid at all costs because it's uncomfortable and because it's just can be terrifying. What happens when we're able to understand more what these emotions are and allow ourselves to feel them rather than just avoid them completely? And that's been a practice for me that has been very helpful, and to kind of, it's partly rewiring, but it's also then kind of taking inventory again. Well, what are those intentions that come from love and that are pure and that are not in this sense of feeling small and contracted, but are feeling more expansive.
Yeah, when you were speaking about something has happened that caused you to feel guilt and shame, and then you took an action based on the guilt or shame, something came up for me. It's like a reactionary action, right? And so it's like we're taking that action in that specific example. If you're feeling guilt or shame about something and then you're taking action to try and cover up the guilt or the shame, then that's a reactionary action, as in you're reacting, not responding. And so something that's really beautiful is like being able to take that sacred pause and, like, if a situation or something happens, or you did something, or someone highlighted that you did something and that brings up guilt and shame in you, or whatever emotion, whatever uncomfortable emotion, like taking that sacred pause and feeling into that, like really letting yourself feel these emotions and reflect, give yourself space, regulate your emotions, regulate your nervous system so that you can then respond from a place that's not reactionary, a place of neutrality. And the same is true for fear, right? Like, I'm just going to speak about money because that's an experience that I'm having currently. If you are feeling fear around money, if you're feeling fear around, debt or not having enough money in your bank account, and you're in the vibration of fear, you're in the emotion of fear, and then you take action from fear, then that action is never going to be as powerful and as potent as if you stop You feel the fear, you regulate yourself through the fear, you use your practices to express the fear, you journal, you use practices to regulate your nervous system back to a sense of safety. Can you spiral yourself all the way up to love and gratitude and then take action from that place? Everything in the universe has a frequency, a rhythm, an energy. And if we're taking action from the energy of love, then we're going to attract situations, circumstances, people that are vibrating in the field of love. If we take action from the fear or the guilt or the shame, then we're going to attract situations that are coming from that place. And yes, temporarily, it might feel like a solution, but it's not actually the solution that we're desiring. But this also plays into being able to take radical responsibility, right? Like if something happens that brings up guilt and shame in us, for example, you know, a friend brings up that maybe she feels like you let them down, for example. Being reactionary can leave you feeling defensive and deny that. And then you you react, you defend yourself, you deny their reality, and all you're focused on is protecting yourself. But if you can take that sacred pause and come into full responsibility, and like this takes a strong, grounded nervous system. Like you can't do this if you don't know how to regulate your own nervous system and your own energy and your own emotion. But if you can take a step back, take a sacred pause and actually let yourself reflect and say, you know what, like she's kind of right. I did let her down in that situation and that sucks. And that feels really uncomfortable in my body to admit that and to feel that. And then like admitting that, being in that powerful place where you can admit that, but then you're coming from love, not from a place of trying to band-aid the shame.
I love what you said about reactionary and I guess what old, and I guess still sometimes now, but old version of me would be like, oh well, I'm not feeling that, sweep it aside and then still go about the day, and it's still there, it still wants attention, it still wants processing and healing. Whereas now, if the situation at the time isn't able to be kind of expressed or move through, then it's something that I would then journal about or like move through a movement practice. But I love that reminder of like, how you're showing up and where you're coming from. It is just so important, and to own that and be responsible for that, and know that every time we take action, whatever space that we're doing that from is sending out like this transmission into the world, this attuned frequency that is then attracting that same energy or caliber. And I think it's so hard for us all to take responsibility. I'm not sure if it's, I think it's partly, not being taught properly that we're all responsible, or maybe not seeing examples of that from as we've grown up, of people taking responsibility and owning it. And whether that be owning emotions or owning consequences of their actions, or owning and understanding, that that's their other person's reality, and that I can see how that's affected you, and having compassion for that as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes there's emotions that we can get comfortable with, or like processes that we can get stuck in. And one thing for me was always more comfortable with like sadness rather than getting angry, or more comfortable with feeling I can't think of another. Well, anxiety has always been like a big one for me, which is slowly kind of reducing as well, as I find better ways to deal with it. And at the same time, it's like this this, I feel for me, is a practice. Like it's never gonna be fully gone and you're never gonna feel it, because that's also part of being human. Like these emotions are natural, and how can we welcome them more and get more comfortable with them in our system so that we can process them. And they're just there wanting to be felt. And we can get into this trap of like, that's good, that's bad, avoid that, this is okay. What's accepted, you know, the woman that is sad, or the damsel in distress, like we can understand that, we're comfortable with that. Whereas the wild woman, the woman who's, you know, out there calling people up, we're not as comfortable with. And, you know, even within me, it's like, oh, well, I don't like confrontation. So sometimes it's like this inner battle of like, do I say something because I can see it, and then where is this coming from? Is it coming from a space of love for that person or the situation, or is it coming because I feel like they've somehow done me wrong? Like, so then also having this internal assessment of where it's coming from, and then how you're moving through that.
Yeah, and noticing what are your tendencies and what are the spaces or emotions that you feel comfortable in. Like you mentioned, for you feel more comfortable in the sadness, damsel in distress, and less comfortable in the wild woman calling people forward. But for some people that might be the other way around, you know, for a lot of women that are in that excess masculine energy that feel like they're needing to control and dominate and feel very safe in that, being the damsel in distress might feel incredibly uncomfortable. And so just like noticing what are the spaces and places and emotions that I'm used to. And if you're used to them, then you're comfortable with them in inverted commas, because it doesn't necessarily mean they feel comfortable. Like they're still, you know, like you don't enjoy necessarily feeling sad. It's not necessarily comfortable.
More familiar.
It's familiar. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, you know, I love listening to Joe Dispenza, who studied neuroscience, studied many aspects of the brain and the body and all the things. And he says, like, you know, we get addicted to the emotions that we experience most of the time. And so if you're someone that feels anxiety a lot of the time, anxiety is a state of arousal in the brain and the body. It's a state of stress. It's the fight-flight response. And that is arousing. It creates adrenaline in the body, which is, you know, it's the stress hormone, but it's the hormone of action, of energy. It has a high energy. And that can be addictive. If you're used to being in anxiety, then your brain and your body are used to circulating the hormones of arousal, adrenaline, and then you would get addicted to that adrenaline. And so if then you find yourself not feeling anxious for a moment, then you're like, well, fuck, something's wrong. I need to feel anxious, because you're addicted to the anxiety, you're addicted to the stress, you're addicted to the hormones and the sensation of that within your body, which sounds ridiculous, but it's completely what happens. Oh.
Sorry, that was a motorbike agreeing.
I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like, nature is full of patterns, and we are so adaptable and flexible in the way that we can be. But yes, there's like tendencies, and it's interesting to see how, yeah, what is something that's been learned or conditioning, and then how can I, in a lot of these cases, like unlearn it and let it go. And it's yeah, it's so interesting to consider that, oh yeah, maybe even though I don't like it, it's familiar because there's some part of me that it's serving, and like seeing that and owning that and having responsibility for that. And then from that place being like, okay, but I choose differently. Because it's almost like you can't choose differently unless you take that full responsibility for it. Because also within my journey, what I've noticed is like the saying, it's not on me, and and kind of pointing the finger to others. It's like you're putting the power away from yourself. And a lot of us, and myself, were scared to take responsibility. Like, it meant that, yeah, I would be held accountable to everything that has happened into my up until now, to my life. But the thing is, we're always responsible, whether we want to admit it and own it or not. But there's some fear in that if you're not wanting to own that. And yet, when there was a defining moment where I was like, wait a second, like, I don't want to keep giving my power away seemingly to things outside of me and be this. It was kind of like a weird thing of being like, well, I know through the teachings of yoga that I am the creator of my world, and that I am like this infinite self that is having this momentary experience in this body, in this lifetime, on this planet. So it was kind of like, if I'm really the soul that's here walking this path, like, there's power in that, and there's something to be owned there, and again, take responsibility for. And it was more of this sense of empowerment, rather than feeling like, yeah, so it was like something shifted or clicked, that I was like, yeah, no, I'm not, and not going to keep kind of blaming other people and then saying that this is a effect because of their cause. Like, I'm owning it, and then from there I get to choose differently. But it takes a while, especially if, you know, there's awareness practices aren't there. Like, it took me years.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up. Yeah, it's like the two sides of the coin. On one side is like, you know, the victim mentality of life is happening to me, and you blame circumstances, situation, people outside of yourself for your reality. And it's easy to look at that objectively and say, well, why would I want that? Nobody wants that. Or to judge that. But then, like you say, there's a benefit to that. And the benefit to being that way is that you don't have to take responsibility. You get to blame things outside of yourself. And therefore, you don't need to change, because none of it's your fault. And so you stay in this life that is not the reality that you want to live in, because you've given all of your power away outside of yourself, because taking that power back is scary, because then it would all be up to you, which it is, or at least that's what I believe. And something that one of my friends says, which I love, is the common denominator in every circumstance and situation that you've ever experienced is you. You are the common denominator. And so you are the one that is in control. And then on the flip side is like taking full responsibility, taking back your power, being empowered instead of victimized or a victim. And life is happening for me, or life is happening through me. Which is, yeah, when we start to take full responsibility for our lives. And obviously this is a spectrum, and, you know, it's hard to jump from one end to the other. But on this journey of, you know, spiritual evolution, then we progress towards full responsibility. And it is such an empowering place to live life from the lens of full responsibility. And yeah, that we can take our power back in literally every situation. And, you know, nobody's perfect, and I definitely don't claim to be perfect at this either. It's often easier to see this in others rather than yourself. And as I'm speaking, I can feel into areas of my life where I could step more into my power, but it's starting to view life from that lens. And yeah, when we find ourselves in a powerless place, or when we find ourselves in a situation or a circumstance or a reality that we're not in love with, it's like, okay, how can I take a step back from that situation? How can I almost like step back into an unbiased viewpoint and see how my actions, my current thoughts, my current emotions are contributing to that reality, and therefore what can I do to change that? Because we can always do something, but when we're stuck within our own minds, We're like zoomed all the way in and we can't see clearly. When you can zoom out, when you can look almost from an outsider perspective, I imagine like zooming out on the earth. Like, how is this person, like, can I see myself through not my own eyes, but somebody else's eyes? And then you can see objectively, what could she be doing? What could she be doing differently? What actions could she be doing? We can always do something. But when we're within the confines of our own consciousness, our own experience, it's like we're in a little box and we can't see outside of that box. There's always, always, always some action that we can do. And then to take it a step further is, you know, coming back to the thread that I mentioned at the start of the podcast of, yes, we can always take some action. There is always some action to do. And what frequency are we taking that action from? What energy are we in? What vibrational state are we in when we take that action? Is it coming from trust? Is it coming from love? Is it coming from joy? Is it coming from gratitude? Or is it coming from fear, guilt, shame, or even lack of belief? You know, like if you're in a situation that you don't love and you're like, okay, well, I mean, I could do XYZ action, but you take that action from a belief space and energetic space of, well, this isn't going to work, then it's probably not going to work. But again, coming back to your point of before of like that thought process, how does that thought process benefit you? The thought process of, well, it's not going to work anyway. It benefits you in that if you think that it's not going to work anyway, then again, you're still disempowered and you're still not taking responsibility. And the benefit of that to you is that it's not your fault.
Yeah. And it's like, there's so much fear in the unknown. And I also, back to what you said before, it's like, it reminds me of the quote, the same, you can't solve the problem with the same mind that created the problem. And it's like, yeah, you have to change your mind. That literally means you need to rewire your brain. Like, you can't keep doing the same things and expect a different result. Another great quote. I don't know who said these, but they're ones that we hear all the time. Yeah. And it's funny when we hear these all the time and there's something that happens, we're like, oh, I get it. Like, and we're reminded of it as well.
Do you want to just say the quotes again? Because they're so good.
You can't solve the problem with the same mind that created the problem. And it's insanity to do the same thing but expect a different result. Yeah. So they might not be word for word, but that's essentially.
Yeah, I think it's the definition of insanity is the same thing over and over and over again, and expect a different result. Yeah. So true.
And it is true. And it's funny because the brain and body are kind of wired to conserve energy to a point where they're going to choose the path that is more familiar. It's going to choose the path that feels more safe. But it requires this outside awareness, or this activating maybe a higher conscious mind, maybe you could call it, of like seeing what's going on, seeing the patterns, understanding, okay, well, I keep getting the same sort of situation, but with different people. I keep feeling like this and I don't like it, but I keep getting it. What is it within me that I can change to obliterate that? And it's interesting. Sometimes it is a belief, it is a thought, it is an action. It's just recognizing it. And then all of a sudden it could be just choosing differently, and it happens. Other times it's a choosing, but then there's this process that takes place, because although you may have chosen it consciously, it's like subconsciously there's other layers that need to be lifted and moved through and rewired. So I find if there's something I've identified and I'm kind of like, well, I've chosen to work on it and I think I'm doing the right things to it, and things still aren't changing, that's where I kind of sort of pray and be like, well, can you show me like what it is that I'm missing? And could you show me, could you be more gentle with this process if it is something that I'm really, really struggling with? And that could be calling on your higher self or God or source creation, whatever it is that feels most in alignment or good for you.
And also leaning on, like you mentioned, if there's a situation that you're aware of, you're taking action on, you're changing your internal reality around, and you're not seeing the result that you're desiring, is like, what are the tiny little micro results that you can feel grateful for? Because maybe the entire situation isn't going to change overnight. But if you're doing some things differently, then you must be experiencing some different results, even if it's tiny. And gratitude is one of the highest vibrational emotions. Joe Dispenza speaks about gratitude all the time. And the longer that we're in gratitude, the more magnetic we are, the more, we're spiraling up in our frequency of emotion, and we're going to be attracting what we desire. So the more gratitude that we can feel, and like I can feel it in the energy of my heart. When I feel into the energy of gratitude, everything opens up and just feels better and nicer. And a smile creeps across my face. And like, even if it had no other effect, which it doesn't, it has massive effects on everything. But even if it had no other effect, why wouldn't we want to feel better in the moment,
And gratitude is such a high frequency, high vibe. And sometimes there are horrible things that happen, and you kind of think, well, how can I be sort of gratitude? What is the what's the silver lining in that? And sometimes it does take a lot of searching, or maybe it's not really trying to figure out the answer then and there. Maybe it's something that is revealed in hindsight or over time. I kind of always consider, like, if it doesn't make sense to me, that's okay, because there's so much more going on. There's a higher power, there's a greater oneness consciousness that is occurring, which I can't even fathom to comprehend. But all I can do is just trust that it's all happening for me, and that all I can do is keep showing up as well. And if I'm getting frustrated, like, why am I getting frustrated? Is that an opportunity for me to practice more patience? Is that an opportunity for me to really show, like, okay, you say you want this, like, how bad do you want this?
I love that. It's so powerful. So powerful.
Because we're so used to quick fixes and getting it instantly. Like, we live in a world where it's kind of crazy how quick things can happen.
Yeah. I sent this quote to a friend the other day Alex Hormozy said it, but it was probably said before him. He's a very successful businessman. And, this is talking specifically about the pathway of an entrepreneur. But he says, once you start on the path of being an entrepreneur, there are only two possible outcomes. You either give up or you eventually achieve success. And I think that's true for literally anything in life, right? That's the outcome of anything you commit to. You're either going to give up or you'll eventually achieve success. If you try hard enough for long enough at anything, you will eventually achieve success. And it's that staying power. And like you said, we live in this world of quick fixes and instant results. And that's not actually how life works, like actual life, not technological life. It takes time, it takes dedication, it takes energy, it takes effort. And that's definitely something that I've learned over and over and over along my journey of being an entrepreneur, and something that I was not, I guess, an expert in. Like my partner, for example, he has this really beautiful relationship to learning and being a beginner and failure and trusting the process. And I don't necessarily. I find it really annoying, and I don't like being bad at things. I don't like being a beginner, and I I have, or especially used to have, this whole insecurity and deep shame around like not being good at something, especially in front of other people. And, you know, it relates back to childhood and my dad, like having that mentality and that belief system around learning and trying, I guess. Whereas my partner's dad just showed him that it was okay to learn. It was okay to fail. Like there's nothing wrong with failure, right? Yeah. And so with everything, it's like, can we come back to that beginner's mind? Can we sit in the humility of the learning process and stick with it? And yeah, like you said, how badly do you want it? And letting that be the fuel to not give up.
Mm-hmm. And two things, when you said that beginner's mind, I was like, oh, like, and this has been reminded to me before, but it's something that was first introduced to me in yoga, being like approach, even if it's like your thousands downward dog or whatever, it's like, how can you have that beginner's mind here? Because you yourself, even though you're that only constant in every practice, you yourself are so different in the expression and experiences and emotion and energy and all of it. The practice stays the same, but you change. So how can you meet yourself and not have that expectation or judgment or shame or guilt how you're showing up, but just allow it to be with, oh, well, this is another new experience. This is somewhere where my mind and awareness is so attuned. It's not tuning out because I've done this a million times before. It's actually because I've done this a million times before, I'm going to go through that effort of presence and implementing my energy. And it's funny how, like, in yoga, I was like comfortable with that, comfortable telling people about it, comfortable teaching about it, and then seeing myself in different scenarios, like having my own business, like putting the pressure on myself that I have to get it all right.
Yeah.
If I fail, or if I feel like if I'm like creating judgments about myself, being like, oh, well, I shouldn't even be doing this. Like, and it's just so funny how different contexts it's just another opportunity to be like, okay, you say that you practice and preach this, like, do you actually practice this in your life and all areas of life? And I think it's interesting to kind of see how you're like, oh, in one area, yeah, I've got it there, but then another area, it's like a totally different scenario that gives you.
Yeah. And then even approaching that from the beginner's mind of like not going down any guilt or shame around that, but like, it's okay, you know, compassion, forgiveness, let's try again. Yeah.
And another thing, just speaking about, I guess, when you try and how hard you want it, I was looking at this manifestation course, and they were talking about how one of the biggest things is people trying to control the how and like every step of the way, and we just have to surrender. And to me, I was like, oh, it's just like a yoga class. Like, I love always being like, damn it, like, I know this, I teach this, I practice this, and being like, okay, well, where are you not actually living that? Because the yoga, and especially the philosophy and teachings, that is the real magic, is when we live it off the mat, not just talk about it and practice it on the mat. And so I feel like part of these things, whether it's about being successful, whatever that success looks like for you, or with your emotions, it's not something that you can control, like with your mind. It's something that almost has a life of its own. And it's that which requires kind of space. And yes, you can have the intention and yes, you can choose. But there's this also kind of paradox about it, that like you have to at the same time release control to let that be felt, to let that go through its natural evolution. Like, it's quite interesting to be like, yeah, we have responsibility. Yeah, you have choice. And there's like this whole universe at play, which just because you think it needs to happen a certain way doesn't mean that that is how it'll go. But you're still almost guaranteed to get like what you want if you're willing to kind of go along with it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're talking about manifestation.
And emotion though as well, because it's interesting to kind of see how, so I see a kinesiologist, Kate Madigan, she's amazing. And it's interesting, we like the frustration coming, when did that come up? Like when I was a 6-month-old baby. And I'm like, how interesting, because at that point we aren't thinking and understanding, but the body has its language and its patterns and its thing. And in that session, then I got quite upset that I was feeling all this frustration towards my parents, because I'm like, how could they have known, one, what I was thinking, and how can I have held this against them for so long when I'm not even conscious really of what I'm thinking at that time? But it was like a body emotional pattern that was there, kind of thing, that started like that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's wild.
So wild.
And like, that's why I think it's important to kind of honor when emotions come up. It doesn't really matter where they've come from or how they started, like how can you allow them to process? But in that session, we had that opportunity to go there and to discover that, which I was just kind of like shocked about, because, I've read the books and all of that, but then even to deal with that, well, I've been holding on, my body's been feeling this for so long, and then it keeps coming up in patterns. And it started at a point where like I wouldn't have been able to consciously recognize it. So like with or without that information, it's just like you got to let go of the control of having to know as well. And like the body and the mind, although we're like this one unit, there can be quite different processes for them.
Yeah, I like what you say about not needing to know or always understand. And I think that's especially important for women. Women are emotional. We're emotional beings, and our emotions also change with our cycle. And sometimes you'll find yourself experiencing an emotion and you don't understand why. And it might just be because at that particular moment in your cycle, you're extra sensitive, and something that normally wouldn't bother you has brought up a much more intense emotional experience. And yeah, I mean, like, in my programs, I teach how to uncover the root and find the message of emotions. But I like what you say about sometimes it's not necessarily having to do that whole process, but just allowing the emotion, like letting yourself feel it, move it, process it, sit with it if you need to, and not have to explain every single emotion. A lovely quote that I'm obsessed with is, emotions are just energy in motion, and we just need to let them move, like emotion, energy in motion. They just want to move. We are not our emotions. We're the soul that experiences them. But if we feel an emotion and then we layer on like, what the fuck is this? And then frustration at feeling the emotion, and then guilt at feeling the emotion, and then like, all these other things, then we've just blocked the emotion and added 50 other things on top of it, when all the energy just wanted to do was move and be felt and be processed. And what you said about experiencing frustration, and with your kinesiologist uncovering that was from when you were a 6-month-old baby, I love that was your process, and I love that kinesiology is able to do that, and I love seeing bodywork practitioners as well. But I don't necessarily think it's 100% necessary to know that. And, this is what you're saying as well, not 100% necessary to know that it was from when you were 6 months old, but just like letting yourself feel the frustration. And yes, it was probably helpful to understand that. But I just want the listeners to know that it's not necessary. You don't have to go out and see a kinesiologist now. Obviously, if your soul feels called to do that, if you feel inspired to, absolutely, but it's not necessary. It's just like, if whatever emotion you're feeling, can you feel it completely? Can you process it completely? Can you let it move through you? And maybe if it's not shifting, or if you know that it's related to something subconscious, or you know that it's related to something deep, then you want to go into a deeper process that I teach around uncovering the root of that emotion. And that's more specifically around triggers, like when you're triggered by an experience in life, when you're really highly triggered by something that doesn't necessarily make sense as to why you were so triggered by something seemingly small, then do the process of uncovering the root, because there's a wound that was triggered. That's why we call them triggers. Yeah, which is just being triggered to be healed.
Yeah, triggers as teachers, helping us. It's almost like igniting that reaction within us so that we can look at it, so that we can give it space, so that we can understand it a bit better or process it and find more harmony. So next time that happens, we're not as triggered, or we're not triggered at all. And then that's, rather than being like, because for me initially it was like, oh, I'm frustrated because I'm triggered, but no, now it's like, oh, I'm grateful that that trigger and that teacher came along to be able to. So it's, yeah, that unlearning of frustration, and that learning that this is something for me.
Yes. And I feel like in my personal evolution, that time gap from feeling frustrated by the experience to flipping it into, okay, this is for me, what can I learn from this, has shortened, you know? And like years ago, there probably wasn't that experience of how is this for me. It was just the frustration of like, why is this happening? Why does this have to happen to me? Why does this always happen? Da, 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 da. And now, you know, like even recently, I think it was Sunday night, something happened that my instinct reaction was like, fuck, why did this have to happen? This is so annoying. Like, I don't want this experience. And then I was like, oh, okay. What is this for? What is this teaching me? And then like deal with it, like alchemize it. Let's go. Let's shift it. Let's deal with it, instead of like, you know, chucking a tantrum, stomping my feet and being like, why is this happening to me? Where? Like, it's just not helpful.
And so much energy
about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like sometimes, I guess going back to that thing of control and emotions, it's like we can't say, okay, well, I'm going to get over this by tomorrow, and then I'll be done and I'll never have to deal with it. It's like these emotions almost have a life of their own. And it's about sitting with them, like you do the triggers, doing the work of being like, what is it that you want me to feel? What is it that you're here to teach me? How is it that what is it that I can learn from you to bring me back into this state of harmony and wholeness and healing?
Yeah. So if someone came to you experiencing a lot of shame about a particular situation, what would you say? Or what advice would you give?
So one of my most recent teachers, Caitlin Erica, was big on shame, in terms of, she'd always say, there's nothing that shame does that love can't do infinitely better. And it's interesting to understand why we feel the shame and where it comes from. And I feel like it's not like, okay, well, now I'm going to love it. That's like too big a jump. But it's like, okay, well, getting comfortable with understanding the process that is like alive within. And then how can I shift that state of shame into something different, or something of a higher vibration? I think you're going to speak about the ladder of emotions soon. But yeah, if someone was feeling that, I'd ask them, like, what is that? How does that serve you, feeling that shame? Like, where is it allowing you to be comfortable? Because I think it's always interesting to reflect on, well, why am I choosing this? And in that, I feel like there's also more empowerment there, like we were speaking about, it being like, well, because I'm choosing this, then I also have the power to change it. Whereas when we feel kind of overwhelmed by the emotions, or just like it's too much to go into or try dissect, that's where it can get the better of us and we can kind of get lost in it or just never really deal with it, but keep kind of being drained by it.
Yeah. If someone came to me feeling a lot of shame around something, then I would ask kind of similar, like, well, coming from the perspective of the shame isn't creating the outcome that you want. The shame can never create the outcome or result that you want. And in that way, it's not serving you because it's not creating the outcome that you want. Like you were speaking to, it can be serving you in other ways, but ultimately it's not serving you because ultimately it's not creating the outcome that you want. So guilt and shame, I sometimes call them useless emotions because they're not getting you anywhere. They don't have the energy of action. They don't have the energy of change. But they're quite, so yeah, on the ladder of emotions, and this is coming from, I can't remember his name, but it's in the book, The Art of Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. I think something Hawkins maybe. And he was a psychoanalyst and he studied a lot on emotions and the brain and lots of things. And he created this, this graph of emotions where he measured the frequency. Like I said at the start, every single thing in the universe has a specific frequency or energy or rhythm or vibration. And emotions, and everybody can relate to that, as in like notes on a piano have a specific frequency. So does everything. Every emotion has a specific frequency. And so he measured the frequency of emotions and he found that guilt and shame are the lowest vibrational emotions. And on the other end of the spectrum was, I think he said enlightenment and bliss, but Joe Dispenza says love and gratitude are the highest vibrational emotions. But so if we're feeling guilt and shame, because they are the lowest vibrational emotion, they have the lowest amount of density. And so it's quite easy to get stuck there because they don't have the energy of action. They don't have the energy of inspiration. And what we constantly want to be doing is spiraling upwards, not spiraling downwards. So how do we go from guilt and shame to then spiral upwards into energy and action, love and gratitude? Like you said, it's too big of a jump to go straight from shame or guilt to love and gratitude. But can we start to progress up the ladder? And so if we understand that the shame and the guilt isn't actually serving us, it can never create the outcome or the result that you want. Can we start to jump up the ladder and the emotion that's neutral? So on this spectrum of emotions, there's like lower vibrational and higher vibrational. The emotion that's neutral, that's in the middle of that, is actually anger, which I found really interesting because anger allows you to flip from the lower vibrational end of the spectrum to the higher vibrational end of the spectrum because it has the potential of action. It has inspiration. It has energy behind it. It can force you into action. And so if someone is feeling a lot of guilt and shame, my suggestion is, can you get yourself to a point where you feel angry? Can you feel angry about this situation? And even if you've done someone else wrong, can you feel angry at that other person for how they contributed to that situation? And this by no means is like, let's just blame the other person and put all of the onus on them. That is not what I'm saying. But staying stuck in guilt and shame is never going to serve you. So can you get into a place where you are able to access the emotion of anger? And then can you feel that anger? Can you process that anger? Can you like stomp your feet and punch a pillow and scream into some pillows and like let that energy start to move you and start to feel angry? And then it's like, okay, what am I like? I'm fucking angry now. What am I fucking going to do about this? Like that has energy, that has potential. And then you can start to take action from there. but obviously not taking action from dysregulated anger. Like, again, that is not what I'm suggesting. But I can think of a particular client who was in an incredibly abusive relationship, and she was in an incredibly abusive relationship, and I think he ended up going to jail. And she felt a lot of guilt around putting him in jail, even though, you know, she was in this incredibly abusive relationship and he was not a very nice person at all. But she felt guilt around putting him in jail. And so my suggestion to her was get angry, like get fucking angry at him, get fucking angry at all that he did for you for X number of years, get angry at all that he put you through, you know, because that is serving you so much more than feeling guilty. And then once she was feeling angry, then she could start to take action. But otherwise she's just sitting in a pit of guilt and like doing nothing, you know, and that's not serving her. Wasn't serving her. Yeah.
I love that you said lower density emotions, and like, of course, that's why we get stuck there, because it's heavy.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Like we can like it's
Yeah.
heavy. It's like bleh, and it makes you want to sit on the couch and eat chips and wear sweatpants.
And it's really hard. It's more effort to get out of that than it is to go from anger to love.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah.
if you're in higher ranges, go from like happiness to joy to love. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's also a great, which I can't believe it. You know how things are like, oh, and it's like there all along. But I also love, like, I'm also surprised that that's right in the middle and that's neutral, because I would always be avoiding anger in the past, seeing it as a negative emotion, and then kind of justifying that by being like, well, there's passion there, seeing it still as an action thing, but that it's good for me and serves me, and not to be afraid of it or put it as a negative and then never do it, never feel it, never allow myself to feel it because it was negative. But it's actually not negative at all. It's literally in the middle, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting just with that story that you told, like, we kind of, I guess, speaking here as in like maybe singling out emotions, but typically like the human is so complex, and our emotions like that energy emotion is watery, and it can be murky, and there can be love in that relationship, but guilt, but anger, but like, you know, so there's, as humans, it's just kind of so layered with these things, and it's interesting to kind of see how the emotions shift and then the different layers that there are, which I think is another reason why it's just hard to control and hard to be like, we're going to do it because this is how my mind works. No, it's like totally different language.
Yeah, so true. I love what you said about there often being, it's complex. It's a complex array of emotions, and sometimes there's emotions stacked on other emotions. Like maybe you feel guilty, and then you feel angry that you feel guilty, and then you feel frustrated that you feel angry or whatever. Yeah, and something else I wanted to say about, you know, you mentioned that these lower vibrational emotions are heavy, they're dense, and therefore it's hard to flip out of them. Something that I love to teach in my programs, Feminine Emotional Mastery and the Fully Expressed Woman, is this process of empowered shifting, being able to shift from those lower density emotions to the higher density emotions, or higher vibrational emotions. Sorry, lower vibrational, higher density. I don't know. They're more dense, they're heavier. Anyway, empowered shifting. So say you're feeling like the lower vibrational emotions of guilt or shame or apathy, or you're just feeling blah and you want to sit on the couch and eat potato chips and like be a potato and sink into the couch, which is totally fine sometimes. But once, this is something that I love to speak about as well, is like, we don't want to suppress our emotions. We want to fully feel our feelings. We don't want to suppress our emotions. We want to let them out. We want to let them be felt. But sometimes we can let them be felt and let them be felt and let them be felt. And we have to hit a point where like, okay, let's fucking shift this now. Let's change this. This is no longer serving me. Because we don't want to bypass them, but we don't want to stay stuck in them as well. And so something that helps me sometimes is if I'm feeling those lower density emotions and then I've decided, okay, let's shift this now, is like doing something like cleaning the house or cleaning my room or like doing the washing or whatever, like doing some kind of action around the house that then is getting me into action instead of sitting on the couch eating potato chips. I'm doing something. So say I'm like, I don't know, feeling guilty about not doing work on my business, but then I'm like, man, I don't want to do work in my business because I feel like a failure because I don't know, something just happened. And I just want to sit on the couch and watch TV. Then I'm like, okay, that's fine to do for a little bit, but now I want to change this. But I'm still not ready to take action in my business because I'm still in this like funky place. That's when I'd like go clean the house, change the sheets, like do the washing. And then I'm already in this place of taking action. I'm already now in a higher vibrational state. I'm in the energy of motion and motivation. I've regained my motivation. Then I can take action in my business.
Yeah, if I sometimes feel like I love that you said, and I do find myself cleaning the house a lot when I'm like kind of feeling like there's more effort required or that I would rather not. But I also like just going outside in the sun or just doing that one thing that I know will help me feel just a little bit better, more inspired, whether it's like a little walk. And I think I was reading the other day that it takes 9 minutes and 44 seconds to like make you feel better through movement. And I was like, it's literally like 10 minutes. And 10 minutes is like nothing. But it's so funny how we can like wallow for like so long. And so funny, but also I love that that you highlighted the density of emotion, that it's heavy and that it's easy to get stuck. Like, yeah, I kind of see that a pebble at the base of the like riverbed. Like, it's going to take a considerable amount of effort, an outside thing to kind of come and pick it up. The pebble's just not going to rotate to the surface. No way. If it's left there, it's going to stay there.
Yeah, or like a big waterfall to move it down the river or something.
Yeah. And sometimes the external circumstances do happen that do move you and that do shift you. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with that. Just, I guess, on acknowledging that it's heavy and that it is hard, but we get to change that and choose differently. And I feel like there was one more thing. Oh yeah, with what you were saying, if there's a situation and can we move from like guilt to anger? I sometimes also, like, if I feel like I'm blaming other people, kind of almost put an imaginary mirror between them and me and be like, okay, well, if I'm frustrated at them, a lot of the time it's been, well, I'm frustrated at myself for allowing myself to get into this situation, for not saying something sooner, for not doing something differently, for not establishing a boundary. Like, it's just interesting as well how these emotions that are felt within us, it's like, and I think you've said this in one of your courses, it's not them making you feel that way. I forget the other part of that. I think it was a certain thing, but it's just like, this is coming alive within you. And it's like owning that. It's not being like, this is your fault, but I can't remember the second part of what you said.
Yeah, I say that I don't think it was a specific quote, but like, I always used to say, this person is making me feel, or this is making me feel, making me feel. And my mum always used to say, nobody can make you feel anything. And it used to fucking piss me off because I didn't understand it. I was like, what do you mean? That situation is making me feel that way. But when we're stepping into this more empowered place, it's like owning those emotions, and instead of saying making me feel, which is hard because it's part of language, it's how we all speak. Instead of saying this person is making me feel or you made me feel, you know, like in conversation and communication with your partner, if you start by saying you made me feel, they're naturally going to be defensive. So can we say, I feel? Not this person is making me feel, I feel. And owning that emotion. And yes, like you say, oftentimes we're actually frustrated at ourselves, or we're XYZ emotion at ourselves. And that's especially true with boundaries and people pleasing. If you're someone that has people pleasing tendencies and you're constantly saying yes to everyone, and putting yourself last, and then you find yourself frustrated and really pissed off at this person because they asked you to do this and pick up your laundry and pick up your cat from next door or whatever. It's like, okay, but you're not actually angry at them. You're angry at yourself for saying yes. Like, you're the one that said yes. You could have said no. And yeah, I totally used to have that experience. And it's like, you know, you can just say no. Like,
yeah.
it's
funny how you just
now.
go along with it. Yeah, it's funny looking back. And I think, yeah, I remember your mum had something to do with it. So your mum always said that, and you'd be like, yeah. And then the teaching unfolded. But I love that. I love that reminder, because it's true. No one can make you feel anything. Like, you get to choose and you have the power. And yeah. Refreshing to be able to have that power and take it back, I feel. And I definitely went through the process of being scared of that first, and then being like, oh no, like, it's better this way.
Yeah, and you can also choose, like, this is similar thread. You can also choose how you feel about certain situations. And this is like a silly example, but say you're like driving your car and then someone cuts you off. You can feel angry, like, this person's an asshole. How dare he cut them off? Fuck you, da 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 da. And you're feeling angry, you're feeling frustrated, you're like blaming them and attacking them. Or you could be like, oh, well, that person's in a hurry and they don't seem like a very nice person, and like wouldn't really want to be in their reality. And then you're just like completely unaffected. But see how it's the same situation? You've chosen how you feel. And so that situation hasn't made you feel anything. It's like, I feel XYZ. And if you find that yourself in that situation and you're normally the person that doesn't get fazed by that, but you get triggered by that and you have this emotional reaction and you start getting angry, it's like, interesting. There's something else in my life currently that I'm feeling pissed off about, that this situation has brought to my attention, you know? And going on another thread in relation to that is like, the person who always would take that from like an angry perspective of like, fuck this person cut me off, da, 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 da. I would assert that someone that always has that reaction to external circumstances doesn't deal with their emotions. And so like, if you can imagine your emotions as like this bottle, you know, people often talk about bottling up your emotions. So say you never express your emotions, you never process them, you don't know how to regulate your emotions or your nervous system or let emotions out, you never let them through, you just suppress them and bottle them up. Then that bottle is eventually going to reach like full. And if that bottle is full and then some tiny little situation happens, it just tips you over the edge and you explode, and that bottle like fizzles over, right? And so if you're someone that is constantly getting triggered by external circumstances, and like someone cutting you off in traffic really creates an emotional reaction in you, then that's something to look at and realize that there's actually a lot of emotions bubbling beneath the surface, years and years and years of suppressed and buried and pushed away emotions that are just wanting to be felt.
They want your attention, your love, and so they can be free, so you can be free. In the end, everyone wins.
Yes, exactly.
And you feel better and you move through life with more ease and harmony and emotion.
Yeah, something else I like to say is like, the feminine energy is emotional. The feminine is emotional. She's water, she's emotion, she's mystic. The masculine is the logic, the brain, the structure. And so as women, if we've spent most of our lives suppressing our emotions, then there's going to be at least some part of us that's disconnected to our feminine essence. And when we're disconnected to our feminine essence, we're disconnected to our body, we're disconnected to our power, we're disconnected to our pleasure. And ultimately, that's not, you know, the yummiest state to be living in. And being able to connect with your body and connect with your emotions then allows you to live in alignment with the needs of your body. And this helps you with boundaries because you can feel into what a yes in your body and what a no in your body feels like. And you can sense a sense of safety within yourself. And then, yeah, like saying no to people gets easier because it's a no in your body. And then you just have to deal with communicating that, but you know the answer. And if you're someone that finds it hard to trust yourself, or if you're someone that finds it hard to make decisions, like you're indecisive and you have to ask everyone in your life for their opinion before you make a decision, then ultimately that's because you don't trust yourself and you don't yet trust yourself. You don't yet have a strong connection with your body to know what feels good and what doesn't feel good for you.
And that's such a process to go through, but also so powerful to recognize and then to get to work on that. Like you said, yet it's not the be all and end all. It's like it can change and it can transform for the better.
Yeah, it's just one decision away.
I love that. It is. It's always just one choice away, and we can get kind of lost and make it complicated and overwhelming, but it's always just one choice. And it might just be one choice to pause, to breathe, to take the space.
Yeah, so empowering. I love this conversation so much. And like I said, you know, I'm definitely not perfect at any of these things by any means. But even having this conversation, I can see how there's places where I can step into deeper empowerment around. So that's exciting.
And for me, it's also very much still a journey. And I guess I like to celebrate how far I've come, but also know that it's kind of just the beginning of it all. And the more I can understand and be on this path and have compassion for that within me, the more I can identify and see it in others as well, and have more love for them and their process and where they're at. And as well, when I find these heavier emotions, I kind of think, well, I know that on the other side of it, there's that power. Like you said, there's behind the shame, if I'm able, and when I'm able to move it and transform it, it's like it unlocks all this energy and potential that can be used for something infinitely better.
Yeah, so good.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing this conversation and unblocking all the pathways in the body and the mind, and I just see it as more just love and heart energy flowing out. Feels good.
Yeah, so good. And thank you for our beautiful listeners for being here on this journey with us. We appreciate you so much. We hope that this episode has been helpful. If you have any questions, please comment, DM us, all the things. And if you're feeling called to take any of this work deeper around emotions, emotional regulation, emotional mastery, self-soothing, creating safety in your nervous system, I have a really beautiful course, Feminine Emotional Mastery, the blast off version, launching very soon, which means that it's normally a self-led course, but it's going to be a guided 6-week live group program. So it includes live group calls with me, which are infinitely valuable because you can ask me all the things. So yeah, that's going to be launching probably by the time that this is out will be open, doors open. So send me a DM if you're wanting to get in on that. I love you so much. I love you, Jess. Have a good
Love
day.
you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Conscious Chats. We are so grateful that you're here.
We'd love to stay connected. You can find me on Instagram at sanctuaryonline.co. I offer an online classes of yoga, Pilates, barre and yin on demand and live, and I would love to practice with you.
And I'm on Instagram at Sacred with Susie. Susie is spelled Susie. And I have a variety of offerings on feminine embodiment, emotional mastery, and more, including my signature program, The Fully Expressed Woman. Feel free to send either of us a message on Instagram if there's any conscious chats you want to hear us riff on. Otherwise, have a beautiful day. We love you. Bye.